Throughout history and the pages of Scripture, there are moments when God didn't just speak in a still, small voice, but through powerful physical signs that no one could miss. From a burning bush in the desert to a blinding light on the road to Damascus, these encounters transformed lives, and they still hold meaning for us today. Imagine hearing a voice so clear or witnessing a sign so undeniable that it leaves you with no doubt that God is speaking directly to you. Have you ever wondered if something similar could happen in your life? What if you've already experienced it and didn't realize? Today we're going to explore these divine encounters, times when God used physical signs to communicate with His people. By looking at both historical and scriptural accounts, we'll uncover what these signs meant, how they were received, and most importantly, how they can guide us in recognizing when God is speaking to us now. Why should we care about these ancient stories of God speaking through physical signs? You might be thinking, that was thousands of years ago. Does God still speak this way today? The Bible affirms that God is never changing. Understanding how He chose to communicate with His people then will help us understand how He can speak to us right now. If you want to grow closer in your relationship with Him, this is critical information. Think about it. In any close relationship, communication is key. Without it, misunderstandings happen, and we can feel distant from the people we love. The same is true with God. If we're not open to the ways He speaks, we might miss out on the guidance, encouragement, or warnings He's trying to give us. God's voice doesn't always come with fireworks or grand displays. Sometimes it's a quiet nudge in our spirit or a perfectly timed event that makes us pause and think. But the Bible and history show us that when God wants to capture our attention, He often does it in a way that we simply cannot ignore. And here's the exciting part. What happened to Moses, Gideon, and Paul wasn't just for them. Their stories show us that God is deeply involved in the lives of His people, and He's still speaking today. We just need to be listening and paying attention to the signs around us. So, what do these signs look like, and how can we recognize them? Let's take a closer look at 4 powerful examples from the Bible where God used physical signs to deliver His message. Sign 1, the burning bush. God speaks through natural elements. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. Exodus 3:2. Let's start with one of the most well-known encounters in the Bible, Moses and the burning bush. Moses was living a quiet life as a shepherd, far removed from his days in Egypt. But one day, while tending his flock, something caught his eye. A bush that was on fire but not being consumed by the flames. Intrigued, he moved closer, and that's when God spoke to him. God used a natural element, fire, to grab Moses' attention and deliver a message that would change the course of history. The burning bush was the beginning of Moses' mission to free the Israelites from slavery. For Moses, the burning bush was also a moment of personal transformation. He had been hiding from his past, uncertain of his future, and this encounter with God revealed His true purpose. In the same way, God can use these pivotal moments in our lives to reveal His purpose for us, reshape our identity, and challenge us to step into the calling He has for us. So, what can we learn from this? Sometimes God uses the ordinary to show us the extraordinary. He may use events in our lives, nature, or even things that seem normal to get our attention and speak to us. But these moments often carry a deeper spiritual implication. They're a signal that God is calling us to grow, to trust Him more, or to step into something new. When something unexpected or unusual happens in your life, pause and ask yourself, could this be God trying to capture my attention? Just like Moses, you may find that God is not only speaking, but also preparing you for something greater. These moments could be signaling a shift in your spiritual journey, calling you into a deeper relationship with Him, or revealing a purpose you've yet to discover. Keep your eyes open. He's still using the world around us to guide and direct our steps. Sign 2. God confirms His will through specific petitions. Espros. Gideon said to God, "If you will save Israel by my hand as you have promised, let me place a wool fleece on the threshing floor. If there is dew only on the fleece and all the ground is dry, then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand." Judges 6:36-37. Now let's look at another example of God speaking through a physical sign, Gideon and the fleece. Gideon was called to lead Israel against the Midianites, but he struggled with doubt and insecurity. Unsure of God's calling, he asked for a specific sign to confirm it. He laid out a wool fleece on the ground and asked God to make the fleece wet with dew while the ground around it remained dry. God answered, and the next morning, the fleece was soaked while the ground was dry. Gideon, still unsure, asked God for the reverse sign the next night, and God once again responded, confirming his will. At first glance, Gideon's story may seem like a simple request for a sign, but it is a picture of how God meets us in our moments of doubt and fear. Just like Gideon, we sometimes need repeated reassurance that we're on the right path, and God, in his patience, provides it. Gideon wasn't just testing God, he was being prepared for the battle ahead, not just physically, but spiritually. Through this process, God was shaping Gideon's trust in him, turning his fear into faith. In our lives, we may find ourselves asking for confirmation just like Gideon, especially when we're faced with decisions or challenges. God may provide clear signs, but they often come with a deeper purpose, strengthening our faith, stretching our trust, and preparing us for what lies ahead. So, when you're unsure of the path God is calling you to, it's okay to ask for guidance and confirmation. But remember, God's signs aren't just about the answer, they're about shaping your faith. Be open to how he's growing you in the process. Like Gideon, you may find that God is not only confirming his will, but also preparing you for a greater role in his plan. Remember that he responds in his time and his way. But more than the answer, he's working on your heart, teaching you to trust him more deeply. Sign 3. God's voice comes through life-changing events. As he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice say to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" Acts 9:3-4. One of the most dramatic encounters with God in the New Testament is Paul's experience on the road to Damascus. Paul was fiercely persecuting Christians when suddenly a bright light from heaven flashed around him, and he fell to the ground. He heard the voice of Jesus asking, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" Blinded by the light, Saul was led into the city, and for 3 days he remained without sight until God sent Ananias to restore him. From that moment, Paul's life changed forever. He went from being a persecutor of the church to one of its greatest apostles. What Paul thought was his mission was completely turned upside down by one divine encounter. For us, this serves as a great reminder that sometimes, when God speaks, it's not just about guiding us on the next step. It's about shifting the entire direction of our lives. God's voice doesn't just give us information, it brings transformation. In your life, there may be moments when God allows something drastic to happen, an unexpected event, a major change, or even a blinding light experience that completely redirects your path. These signs often come when we're moving in a direction that doesn't align with God's purpose for us, and while they may be unsettling, they are ultimately acts of grace, designed to bring us back to where He wants us to be. If you're in a season of unexpected change or feel like God is interrupting your plans, consider that He may be redirecting you towards something greater. While these moments can be disorienting, they often mark the beginning of a deeper, more powerful journey with God. Trust that He's leading you, even when the road feels unfamiliar. Sign 4. Elijah on Mount Horeb. God speaks in a whisper. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. 1 Kings 19:12-13. The last encounter we'll talk about is found in the story of Elijah, a prophet who had just experienced a great public victory over the prophets of Baal. Despite this triumph, Elijah found himself fleeing for his life, exhausted, discouraged, and questioning his purpose. He traveled to Mount Horeb, where he sought refuge in a cave. God told Elijah to stand on the mountain because His presence would pass by. First came a powerful wind that shattered rocks, then an earthquake, and then a fire. But God was not in any of these. Finally, there came a gentle whisper, and in that moment, Elijah knew it was God. God will not always speak through dramatic signs or events. Sometimes He communicates through the stillness, in a gentle whisper. After the whirlwind of life's challenges, God often speaks to us in the quiet moments when we've come to the end of ourselves. Elijah, in his moment of weakness and doubt, didn't need more noise or spectacle. What he needed was the intimate, quiet voice of God reminding him of his purpose. In our fast-paced world, it's easy to miss the whisper of God amidst the noise of daily life. We often expect God to communicate through grand, unmistakable signs. But sometimes, the deepest spiritual transformation happens in the quiet, when we slow down, seek solitude, and listen with our hearts. If you're feeling overwhelmed or spiritually dry, take time to step away from the busyness and noise of life. Find a quiet place, whether physically or spiritually, and tune your heart to hear God's gentle whisper. His voice may not come in the earthquake or fire, it may come in the stillness, reminding you of His presence and purpose for your life. The whisper of God often comes when we're still enough to hear it, and those moments carry deep spiritual significance. Sometimes, the whisper is all we need to remind us of His love and our purpose. As we've seen in these stories, God's voice isn't limited to one form. Sometimes it's loud and undeniable, like the burning bush with Moses, or the blinding light with Paul. Other times, it's a gentle whisper, as Elijah experienced. And often, like with Samuel, it's persistent, calling out to us until we finally respond. But here's the most important thing: God is still speaking today. He hasn't stopped. He may not always send a sign as dramatic as a burning bush or a heavenly light, but He is always reaching out to guide, encourage, and direct us. It's important to remember that God speaks in ways that are personal to us. He knows exactly what will get our attention and how best to communicate with us. The question is, are we listening? Are we positioning ourselves to hear God's voice in our daily lives? It might not be through an obvious sign, but maybe through a quiet nudge in our spirit, a well-timed word from a friend, an inside nudge to read a certain passage of the Bible, or a circumstance that makes us stop and think. So, I encourage you, take some time this week to reflect on the ways God may be speaking to you. Is there something in your life that has caught your attention recently? Have you felt a pull or a call you haven't fully understood? Like Samuel, simply say, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening," and be open to what God may reveal to you. Just as He reached out to Moses, Gideon, Paul, Elijah, and Samuel, He is reaching out to you in a way that you can understand. Trust that He is near, guiding you with love and purpose, and that when the time is right, His voice will be clear.